100 Years of History in 10 Minutes.
On September 19, 1893, the governor, Lord Glasgow, signed a new electoral act into law. As a result of this landmark legislation, New Zealand became the first self-governing country in the world in which women had the right to vote in parliamentary elections. In most other democracies, including Britain and the United States, women did not win the right to be allowed to vote until after the First World War. New Zealand's world leadership in women's suffrage became a central part of our image as a trailblazing social laboratory. This significant moment in history paved the way for millions of more women to be able to voice their opinions on important political issues across the world. Currently, around 200 countries now have the right for women to vote, thanks to New Zealand. Knowing the U.S. is gearing up to engage them in the Pacific Ocean theater of World War II, Japan deploys a massive air attack on U.S. Navy ships parked at Pearl Harbor. The surprise assault by 353 Japanese aircraft led to the deaths of 2,403 people, including 1,177 sailors aboard the ill-fated USS Arizona, one of 19 vessels that were damaged or destroyed in the attack. Nearly 330 aircraft were also damaged or destroyed. The United States declared war on Japan the next day and 3 days later against Germany and Italy. In addition to the effects Pearl Harbor had on its relations to other countries, this infamous tragedy also led to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is the next event we will be talking about. On August 6, 1945, during World War II, 1939–45, an American B-29 bomber dropped the world's first deployed atomic bomb over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The explosion immediately killed an estimated 80,000 people. Tens of thousands more would later die of radiation exposure. 3 days later, a second B-29 dropped another A-bomb on Nagasaki, killing an estimated 40,000 people. Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his country's unconditional surrender in World War II in a radio address on August 15, citing the devastating power of a new and most cruel bomb. Throughout all of history to this day, the two bombs dropped here were the only atomic bombs ever dropped in warfare. In 1954, a milestone was made with the first long-term successful kidney transplantation by Joseph Murray. The transplantation was done between monozygotic twins. The organ survived for 8 years. For his efforts in kidney transplantation, Murray was honored with the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1990. A longtime member of the Harvard Medical School faculty, Murray pioneered the field of organ transplantation. This outstanding achievement has given the gift of life to hundreds of thousands of people destined to die young. Murray returned to the Peter Bent Brigham Hospital in Boston after serving as a plastic surgeon in World War II. Murray became the surgical leader of a team whose goal was to achieve human organ transplantation, starting with the kidney. It all started October 4 when the Soviet Union stunned the world by launching the world's first satellite into space. They sent Sputnik into orbit and around the Earth in 1957, where it remained in space until 1958. American scientists raced to launch a satellite themselves. Congress set aside billions of dollars for space research. Once both the Soviet Union and the United States had launched their own satellites into space, the race to send a man into space began. In 1961, the Soviet Union sent Yuri Gagarin into space to orbit the Earth. The Americans trailed behind because the rockets that carried U.S. satellites were smaller and less powerful. Despite this, in 1961 President Kennedy pledged to put an American on the moon by the end of the decade. The early Soviet lead in the space race disappeared, as American scientists and engineers found ways to improve rocket design, construction and testing. The Berlin Wall was built on August 13 of 1961. This took place in Berlin, East and West Germany. By the late summer of 1961, the loss of skilled workers such as teachers, engineers, and doctors to the west reached crisis levels in East Germany. On August 12, 2,400 East Germans crossed into West Berlin, the most in a single day. The next day, with the approval of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, East Germany built a wall that would extend 27 miles through Berlin, dividing families and friends for the next 28 years. The wall would serve as an enduring symbol of the Cold War, used by Presidents John Kennedy and Ronald Reagan to inspire a divided city. In 1962 the Soviet Union began to secretly install missiles in Cuba to launch attacks on U.S. cities. The confrontation that followed, known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, brought the two superpowers to the brink of war. The U.S. discovered Soviet missile bases in Cuba and blockaded the island. A secret agreement led to the removal of missiles from Cuba and Turkey. Many people feared the world was on the brink of nuclear war. However, disaster was avoided when the U.S. agreed to Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev's 1894–1971 offer to remove the Cuban missiles in exchange for the U.S. promising not to invade Cuba. Kennedy also secretly agreed to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey. Bogged down by the Vietnam War, President Lyndon B. Johnson struggles constantly to pivot away from the war to focus on his stated goals of reducing poverty, ending segregation, and establishing the social programs many Americans rely on to this day, including the immensely popular Medicare program. During his War on Poverty State of the Union address of January 8, 1964, LBJ outlines the need for the country to reduce poverty and racial discrimination, attend to the health needs of the elderly, and other progressive goals. Later achievements during LBJ's administration are the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Social Security Amendments of 1965. Isabel Perón, in full Isabel Martínez de Perón, née María Estela Martínez Cartas, born February 4, 1931, La Rioja, Argentina, Argentine politician who served as President of Argentina in 1974–76. The world's first woman president. She was the third wife of President Juan Perón and served as vice president, 1973–74 in his administration. While this is an impressive feat, her rule was not popular. On March 24, 1976, following a sharp rise in political terrorism and guerrilla activity, the military deposed Isabel Perón and instituted one of the bloodiest regimes in South American history. She was imprisoned for 5 years on the charge of abuse of property and, upon her release in 1981, settled in Madrid. In 2007, she was arrested in Spain in connection with the disappearance of an Argentinian activist in 1976, but the case was later dismissed. Stock markets plunge around the world, signaling the start of the Great Recession. The Great Recession was a global economic downturn that devastated world financial markets as well as the banking and real estate industries. The crisis led to increases in home mortgage foreclosures worldwide and caused millions of people to lose their life savings, their jobs and their homes.
It's generally considered to be the longest period of economic decline since the Great Depression of the 1930s.